The US government is reportedly planning to impose strict travel bans on citizens from over 40 countries, including 6 Caribbean nations. These new restrictions could shake the very foundations of travel, business, and family connections across the region. In this video, we'll uncover why the US is considering travel restrictions on 6 Caribbean nations, what impact they could have on the Caribbean region, and how local leaders are responding to this looming threat. With the Trump administration already shaking up US foreign policy, these potential travel bans could change the way people travel, do business, and maintain family ties across borders. So let's find out what's really at stake for the Caribbean and whether these drastic measures will become a reality. On March 15, 2025, the New York Times reported on the proposal, which surprised many Caribbean leaders and nationals, sparking new fears of stringent travel restrictions under Trump's new administration. However, this was not new because, in his first presidential term, Trump had imposed strict immigration rules and foreign policies on some Caribbean countries. From announcing the US withdrawal from the World Health Organization (WHO), the Paris Climate Accord, Haiti's peacekeeping mission, and an immediate freeze on nearly all USAID-funded programs, Trump's hardline administration seems to spare no one in its foreign policy agenda. Even the US historical allies are not confident of their future peaceful coexistence with the US as President Trump takes trade wars at their doorsteps, a move that could severely impact their economies. According to the New York Times report, the US might impose visa restrictions on 6 Caribbean nations, including the Caribbean nations of St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Haiti, and Cuba, due to what the officials termed as deficient visa vetting and screening. With 43 countries on the list, Trump's new administration would implement the restrictions in a 3-tiered approach: red, orange, and yellow, based on their perceived level of threat. The categorization was based on concerns about inadequate security practices for issuing passports, the level of information sharing on travelers, and the ease of selling citizenship to people from countries on the US ban list or those whom US officials otherwise deem as a national security threat. Countries on the red list would have their citizens banned from traveling to the US, while countries on the middle or orange list would face visa restrictions. Countries on the yellow list, however, would be put on notice, and their access to the US would be restored if they addressed specific security concerns within 60 days. If any country on the yellow list fails to address the problems, its status will be escalated to more restricted categories. Under the proposal, the Caribbean countries on the yellow list include Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia. This means their government needs to address particular security concerns raised by the US to have their access to the US restored after a 60-day review window. While much hasn't been revealed concerning the reported visa restrictions, certain immigration policies, including the Golden Visa programs, could make some Caribbean countries potential targets for US travel restrictions. The US is concerned that programs allowing foreign nationals to buy second citizenships, called golden passports, could be exploited to bypass travel bans. These passports let individuals from restricted countries apply for US visas, potentially undermining security efforts. The US has raised concerns that such programs could be exploited to bypass existing travel restrictions by allowing citizens from countries on the US travel ban list to acquire a second citizenship easily, using their passports to apply for a travel visa that would enable them to enter the US without any restriction. Reports suggest that the controversial programs will allow foreign nationals to buy a second citizenship or golden passport for as little as $100,000, giving them visa-free access to more than 100 countries worldwide. Initially viewed as a means to boost countries' economies by attracting more foreign investments, the citizenship by investment programs have increasingly become an object of concern among the US and the European Union over the lack of transparency in information sharing. Now, unlike the 4 Eastern Caribbean nations, Haiti is on the orange list. This means Haitian nationals would face slightly less harsh restrictions than those on the red list, who would face an outright ban from traveling to the US. Haitians wanting to travel to the US would need to request a waiver on the ban before being allowed to do so. However, Venezuela and Cuba are on the red list. This means citizens from these countries would be totally banned from traveling to the US. given the long-standing strained relations between Washington and Havana. The move to ban Venezuelans from entering the US isn't a surprise. The report suggests that the Trump administration views Cuba and Venezuela as long-standing adversaries of US foreign policy. By the way, if you're finding this video insightful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to bring up-to-date news from the Caribbean to you. Thank you. The list is still being finalized according to reports. Reuters reported that the list had not been finalized and the outlets may not have been approved by the Secretary of State yet. In fact, the State Department denied the existence of a list earlier in the week and said it did not create the memorandums that have been circulating. However, the department acknowledged on March 14 that it was conducting a review of all visa programs as mandated by Trump's order, but declined to say whether it had made any formal recommendations or when they could go into effect. As per the latest updates, if the new restrictions are adopted, visa holders from countries subject to them would face a new reality, one that could negatively impact their plans to travel, work, study, or participate in sporting events in the US. The policy would severely restrict access to the United States, including high-ranking government officials, creating consternation not just from a policy standpoint, but among people who have children and other relatives living in the US, as they will be unable to travel to the US even if they have a valid visa. Following the report, Caribbean leaders quickly sought clarification on these potential restrictions. The governments of both Antigua and Barbuda and St. Kitts and Nevis issued separate diplomatic notes to the State Department seeking confirmation about the reports and clarification. In a diplomatic note sent to the U.S. State Department on March 16, the Antigua and Barbuda Embassy in the U.S. expressed deep concern over the New York Times article, suggesting the country being on the yellow list is due to perceived deficiencies or risk facing travel restrictions. St. Lucia's Prime Minister Philip Pierre also stated that his administration had received no official communication from the U.S. regarding the country's inclusion on the list. Quote, "The government of St. Lucia and the St. Lucian Embassy in Washington, D.C. are actively seeking clarification on this matter," said the Prime Minister's office in a statement. The latest reports of travel restrictions follow Trump's presidential executive order that he signed in January, focusing on protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. The executive order calls on the U.S. cabinet members to prepare and submit a report detailing countries, quote, "for which vetting and screening is so deficient as to warrant a partial or full suspension of admission to the U.S." Not only that, but the report should also identify, quote, "how many nationals from those countries," unquote, have entered or been admitted to the United States since 20th of January 2021, when former President Joe Biden assumed office as the head of state. 4 officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Attorney General Pam Bondi, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, are tasked with producing this report. According to former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf, the executive vice president of the Trump-aligned America First Policy Institute, different factors will be considered to evaluate whether a country gets a travel restriction or not. According to Wolf, one of the factors the administration is likely to take into consideration is how frequently a country reports lost or stolen passport data to Interpol. This centers on travelers' information sharing requirements by the U.S. to ensure no one enters the U.S. on stolen or bought visas. Countries are placed on the 3rd tier due to issues with their background checks and failure to cooperate in accepting nationals the U.S. wants to send back. Travel bans on those island nations could potentially be used as bargaining chips in negotiations to accept U.S. deportees whose home countries refuse to take them back. The Trump administration has justified the travel restrictions as measures designed to protect American citizens from aliens who intend to commit terrorist attacks, threaten the national security, espouse hateful ideology, or otherwise exploit the immigration laws for malevolent purposes. The proposal came amid continued pushback from Caribbean leaders over U.S. visa cancellation threats over their government's employment of Cuban doctors. Last month, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the State Department is taking steps to cancel the visas of anyone participating in Cuba's medical missions. These missions deploy nurses and doctors to countries around the world, including in the Caribbean. Even some government officials now face the threat of having their visas cancelled over their use of Cuban medical professionals, whom the US has long said are under forced labor to fund the Cuban regime. The recently reported restrictions would reflect a significant expansion of travel bans imposed during President Donald Trump's first term. President Joe Biden revoked those bans in 2021, but with Trump back in office, his administration argues that reinstating and expanding this policy is necessary. While the final decision rests with the White House, sources within the State Department suggest that the lists could still be developed along the line reported. As the review unfolds, Caribbean governments are hoping to avoid travel restrictions that could significantly impact tourism, business, and diplomatic relations. However, despite the challenges posed by potential travel restrictions, the Caribbean's resilience and unity remain its strength. With determination and diplomacy, the region can navigate these uncertain times and continue to thrive. Now we have some questions for you. How do you think these travel restrictions might affect the Caribbean's economy and diplomatic relations? And how do you think Caribbean leaders will respond to protect their citizens? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to know your opinion on this matter. If you found this video insightful, you should also check out our video on how Trump's US aid freeze is affecting the Caribbean. If you want to stay updated on the latest news about the Caribbean, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. This is Caribbean Focus, and we'll see you in the next video.